Session 10, January 27th, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner. I think it would clarify things for us to go back to the time just before the transfer of souls from Maldek to see how the Law of One operated with respect to this transfer and why this was necessary. What happened to Maldek, or the people on Maldek, to cause them to lose their planet? How long ago did this occur? Ra, I am Ra. The peoples of Maldek had a civilization somewhat similar to that of the societal complex known to you as Atlantis, in that it gained much technological information and used it without care for the preservation of their sphere, following to a majority extent the complex of thought, ideas, and actions which you may associate with your so-called negative polarity or the service to self. This was, however, for the most part, couched in a sincere belief thought structure, which seemed to the perception of the mind-body complexes of this sphere to be positive and of service to others. The devastation that racked their biosphere and caused its disintegration resulted from what you call war. The escalation went to the furthest extent of the technology this social complex had at its disposal in the space-time present of the then time. This time was approximately 705,000 of your years ago. The cycles had begun much earlier upon this sphere due to its relative ability to support the first dimensional life forms at an earlier point in the space-time continuum of your solar system. These entities were so traumatized by this occurrence that they were in what you may call a social complex knot, or tangle, of fear. Some of your time passed. No one could reach them. No beings could aid them. Approximately 600,000 of your years ago, the then existing members of the Confederation were able to deploy a social memory complex and untie the knot of fear. The entities were then able to recall that they were conscious. This awareness brought them to the point upon what you would call the lower astral planes, where they could be nurtured until each mind-body-spirit complex was able, finally, to be healed of this trauma to the extent that each entity was able to examine the distortions it had experienced in the previous life illusion complex. After this experience of learned teaching, the group decision was to place upon itself a type of what you may call karma alleviation. For this purpose, they came into incarnation within your planetary sphere in what were not acceptable human forms. This, then, they have been experiencing until the distortions of destruction are replaced by distortions towards the desire for a less distorted vision of service to others. Since this was the conscious decision of the great majority of those beings in the Maldek experience, the transition to this planet began approximately 500,000 of your years ago, and the type of body complex available at that time was used. Questioner. Was the body complex available at that time what we refer to as the ape type? Ra. That is correct. Questioner. And have many of the Maldek entities transformed now? Are they now still second density, or are they forming some third density planet now? Ra. The consciousness of these entities has always been third density. The alleviation mechanism was designed by the placement of this consciousness in second-dimensional physical-chemical complexes which are not able to be dexterous or manipulative to the extent which is appropriate to the workings of the third-density distortions of the mind complex. Well, have any of these entities moved on now, made a, shall we say, graduation at the end of a 75,000 year-end cycle and gotten out of the second-density body into third-density type bodies? Ra. I am Ra. Many of these entities were able to remove the accumulation of what you call karma, thus being able to accept a third density cycle within a third density body. Most of those beings so succeeding have incarnated elsewhere in the creation for the succeeding cycle in third density. As this planet reached third density, some few of these entities became able to join the vibration of this sphere in the third density form. There remain a few who have not yet alleviated, through the mind-body-spirit coordination of distortions, the previous action taken by them. Therefore, they remain. Questioner. Are these the Bigfoot you spoke of? Ra. I am Ra. These are one type of Bigfoot. Questioner. Then our present race is formed of a few who originally came from Maldek and quite a few who came from Mars. Are there entities here from other places? Ra, I am Ra. There are entities experiencing your space-time continuum who have originated from many, many places, as you would call them, in the creation. For when there is a cycle change, those who must repeat then find a planetary sphere appropriate for this repetition. It is somewhat unusual for a planetary mind-body-spirit complex to contain those from many, many various loci. But this explains much, for, you see, you are experiencing the third dimensional occurrence with a large number of those who must repeat the cycle. The orientation, thus, has been difficult to unify even with the aid of many of your teach-learners. Questioner: when Maldek was destroyed, did all people of Maldek have the problem, or were some advanced enough to transfer to other planets? Ra, I am Ra. In the occurrence of planetary dissolution, none escaped, for this is an action which redounds to the social complex of the planetary complex itself. None escaped the knot or tangle. Questioner: is there any danger of this happening to Earth at this time? Ra, I am Ra. We feel that this evaluation of your planetary mind-body-spirit complex's so-called future may be less than harmful. We say only the conditions of mind exist for such development of technology and such deployment. It is the distortion of our vision understanding that the mind and spirit complexes of those of your people need orientation rather than the toys demanding dismantlement. For are not all things that exist part of the Creator? Therefore, freely to choose is your honor duty. Questioner: when a graduation occurs and an entity or entities move at the end of a cycle from one planet to another, by what means do they go from one planet to the other? Ra, I am Ra. In the scheme of the Creator, the first step of the mind-body-spirit totality beingness is to place its mind-body-spirit complex distortion in the proper place of love light. This is done to ensure proper healing of the complex and eventual attunement with the totality beingness complex. This takes a very variable length of your time-space. After this is accomplished, the experience of the cycle is dissolved and filtered until only the distillation of distortions in its pure form remains. At this time, the harvested mind, body, spirit, totality, beingness evaluates the density needs of its beingness and chooses the more appropriate new environment for either a repetition of the cycle or moving forward into the next cycle. This is the manner of the harvested, guarded, and watched over by many. Questioner: when the entity is moved from one planet to the next, is he moved in thought or in a vehicle? Ra, I am Ra. The mind, body, spirit, totality, beingness is one with the Creator. There is no time-space distortion. Therefore, it is a matter of thinking the proper locus in the infinite array of time-spaces. Questioner: while an entity is incarnate in this third density at this time, he may either learn without consciously knowing what he's doing, or he may learn after he is consciously aware that he is learning in the ways of the Law of One. The second way, it is possible for the entity to greatly accelerate his growth. Is this not correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner: then, although many entities are not aware of this, what they really desire is to accelerate their growth, and it is their job to discover this while incarnate. Is it possible that they can accelerate their growth much more while incarnate in third density than between incarnations of this density? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. We shall attempt to speak upon this concept. The Law of One has, as one of its primary distortions, the free will distortion. Thus, each entity is free to accept, reject, or ignore the mind-body-spirit complexes about it and ignore the creation itself. There are many among your social memory complex distortion who, at this time-space, engage daily, as you would put it, in the working upon the Law of One and one of its primary distortions, that is, the ways of love. However, if this same entity, being biased from the depths of its mind-body-spirit complex towards love light, were then to accept responsibility for each moment of the time-space accumulation of present moments available to it, such an entity can empower its progress in much the same way as we described the empowering of the call of your social complex distortion to the Confederation. Questioner: would you state it in a little different way how you empower this call? Ra, I am Ra. We understand you speak now of our previous information. The call begins with 1. This call is equal to infinity and is not, as you would say, counted. It is the cornerstone. The second call is added. The third call empowers or doubles the second, and so forth, each additional caller doubling or granting power to all the preceding call. Thus, the call of many of your peoples is many, many-powered, and overwhelmingly heard to the infinite reaches of the one creation. Questioner: for general development of the reader of this book, could you state some of the practices or exercises to perform to produce an acceleration toward the law of one? Ra: I am Ra. Exercise 1. This is the most nearly centered and usable within your illusion complex. The memory contains love. That is the lesson goal of this illusion or density. The exercise is to consciously seek that love in awareness and understanding distortions. The first attempt is the cornerstone. Upon this choosing rests the remainder of the life experience of an entity. The second seeking of love within that moment begins the addition. The third seeking powers the second, the fourth powering or doubling the third. As with the previous type of empowerment, there will be some loss of power due to flaws within the seeking in the distortion of insincerity. However, the conscious statement of self to self of the desire to seek love is so central an act of will that, as before, the loss of power due to this friction is inconsequential. Exercise 2. The universe is one being. When a mind-body-spirit complex views another mind-body-spirit complex, see the Creator. This is a helpful exercise. Exercise 3. Gaze within a mirror. See the Creator. Exercise 4. Gaze at the creation which lies about the mind-body-spirit complex of each entity. See the Creator. The foundation or prerequisite of these exercises is a predilection towards what may be called meditation, contemplation, or prayer. With this attitude, these exercises can be processed. Without it, the data will not seek down into the roots of the tree of the mind, thus enabling and ennobling the body and touching the spirit. Questioner: I was wondering about the advent of the civilization called Atlantis and Lemuria, the way these civilizations occurred, and where did they come from, inaudible civilizations? Ra: I am Ra. This is the last question of the work. The civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria were not one but two. Let us look first at the Mu entities. They were beings of a somewhat primitive nature, but those who had very advanced spiritual distortions. The civilization was part of this cycle, experienced early within the cycle at a time of approximately 53,000 of your years ago. It was a helpful and harmless place which was washed beneath the ocean during a readjustment of your sphere's tectonic plates through no action of their own. They set out those who survived and reached many places in what you call Russia, North America, and South America. The Indians, of whom you have come to feel some sympathy in your social complex distortions, are the descendants of these entities. Like the other incarnates of this cycle, they came from elsewhere. However, these particular entities were largely drawn from a second density planet, which had some difficulty due to the age of its sun in achieving third density life conditions. This planet was from the galaxy Deneb. The Atlantean race was a very conglomerate social complex which began to form approximately 31,000 years in the past of your time-space continuum illusion. It was a slow-growing and very agrarian society until approximately 15,000 of your years ago. It reached quickly a high technological understanding which caused it to be able to use intelligent infinity in a less informative manner. We may add that they used intelligent infinity as well, manipulating greatly the natural influxes of the indigo or pineal ray from divine or infinite energy. Thus, they were able to create life forms. This they began to do instead of healing and perfecting their own mind-body-spirit complexes, turning their distortions into what you may call the negative. Approximately 11,000 of your years ago, the first of the what you call wars caused approximately 40% of this population to leave the density by means of disintegration of the body. The second and most devastating of the conflicts occurred approximately 10821 10,821 years in the past, according to your illusion. This created an earth-changing configuration, and the large part of Atlantis was no more, having been inundated. 3 of the positively oriented of the Atlantean groups left this geographical locus before that devastation, placing themselves in the mountain areas of what you call Tibet, what you call Peru, and what you call Turkey. Do you have any questions before we close this meeting? Questioner: only one, other than what we can do to make the instrument more comfortable. I have only one other question. I would like to have brief information of the word you use. Galaxy. Ra. I am Ra. We use this term known to your people by the sound vibration complex, galaxy. We accept that some galaxies contain one system of planetary and solar groups, others containing several. However, the importance of the locus in infinite time-space dimensionality is so little that we accept the distortion implicit in such an ambiguous term. Questioner: then would 9 planets and our sun we have here in our system, would you refer to that as a solar galaxy? Ra. We would not. Questioner: how many stars approximately would be in a galaxy? Ra. It depends upon the galactic system. Your own, as you know, contains many, many millions of planet entities and star bodies. Questioner: I was just trying to get a definition you were using for a galaxy. You mentioned them a couple of times, and it seemed to me that inaudible. What you call a galaxy, we call a planetary system. Is there any way to make the instrument more comfortable? Ra. I am Ra. This instrument could be made somewhat more comfortable if more support were given the body complex. Other than this, we can only repeat the request to carefully align the symbols used to facilitate this instrument's balance. Our contact is narrow-banded, and thus the influx brought in with us must be precise. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one Creator.